So, welcome everyone. And Philip, thank you very much. I'm going to welcome you in a second or two. So, let's get started. Today, our guest is no other than Philip Noyce, an Australian director, producer, and screenwriter of films and television. In 1991, he moved from Australia, where he was working in the film industry from the age of 18, into the United States. And there, over a period of time, he did 5 major films. Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford in 1994, which was a huge commercial success. At the time, grossing $216 million, which was one of the biggest gross-ins in the industry. In 1999, Bone Collector with Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie, no other than those 2 stars. Later on, he also did Stolen Generations and Rabbit Proof Fence, which won the AFI Award for Best Film in 2002. More recently, Salt with Angelina Jolie. And for those of you who are used to using Netflix, Philip has done also the What If film, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to try and say the name of the main actress, because I make a mistake every time I speak about Renee, and I never say her last name.
Zellweger.
Thank you, Zellweger. And it's an absolute great series. As a matter of fact, I have an extra question that I'm going to ask you later on about the series and how that has transformed the industry. So Philip, thank you so much for accepting the Acosphere Instagram Live invitation today. We're delighted to have you as our speaker. And without further ado, I'm going to ask you my first question, which is the traditional one. What in your trade, your activities, makes you an international public speaker? Where do you get the confidence to stand there and speak? And how do you command attention?
Well, of course, in the pandemic age, communicating as we are now is all the rage. But even before COVID-19, it was absolutely essential that you won friends and influenced people in person. This was how you sold your projects. This is how you attracted investors. And the most important thing, this is how you got major actors to join you. So it's, necessity is the mother of invention, and public speaking is the necessity of a film director to survive.
Yeah. I can understand that. And so you're speaking all the time on a scene, and you actually have large crews, and we'll talk about this in a second. You are a world-renowned Australian filmmaker and television director, producer, and screenwriter, to name a few of your skills. What's your story, Philip?
My story is that I grew up in Australia, in a country that had no film industry and no likelihood of ever achieving one, because as an English-speaking cultural satellite of the UK and US, there was no economic necessity to make Australian films. So at 18, I went to a screening of experimental cinema, short films, called underground movies. And there I saw for the first time a different type of cinema, the cinema of personal expression. But most importantly for my career, afterwards I hung around in the foyer, and there I met 3 guys. They all had beards. They called themselves film directors, and their motto was, anyone can make a movie. Well, I went home that night. I stopped shaving. I haven't shaved since. And I pretty soon developed this passion to call myself a film director. So I was still in high school. After I left school, I worked for 6 weeks digging sewage ditches. I then sold parts to my friends. I mean, for $400, the lead actor got the leading role. And I made a short film about the sex fantasies of a teenager. And that was the last time that 6 weeks of digging sewage ditches was the last time I worked at any job except making movies.
Wow.
And I was lucky because I joined a whole group of Australian film directors who were just coming up, and we established what we call in Australia the new wave.
Mm-hmm.
Our audiences were hungry to see themselves like babies looking in the mirror. Australians just flocked to see Australian movies. So I was very lucky. It was a certain time in the history, the cultural history of the country. And eventually I made enough movies in Australia to be invited to Hollywood. The big one in Australia was Dead Calm, starring Sam Neill and Nicole Kidman.
When did you do that one? When was that one?
That was shot in 1997 and 8 and released in 1987. 1987-88, released in 1989 in Australia and in 1990 in the rest of the world.
Wow.
Immediately the phone started ringing. It was Hollywood calling. Come over and make a film like that for us. I did, and I was lucky enough to be offered Patriot Games, starring Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan, and that was the beginning of almost 10 years in Hollywood, working around the clock, moving from one movie to the next with this big, giant machine supplying the scripts, the actors, the money, and selling the movies as Hollywood does so effectively all around the world.
Well, you probably have had some, challenges, but many opportunities at that time. Could you kindly share with us some anecdotes related to that period of time, and how did you handle them to build up your career?
Okay, the biggest decision I had to make was to leave Hollywood. That was the most important decision that I made in my whole career. In 1999, I made, I think, the fourth or fifth film in a row that opened at #1 and did well at the box office, and that was The Bone Collector, starring the then almost unknown Angelina Jolie and Denzel Washington. And at that moment, I was offered a big film, The Sum of All Fears, another in the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan series for Paramount. But I turned down the film, went back to Australia to make a film called Rabbit Proof Fence about the stolen generation of Indigenous Australians, a film that was not likely to be successful, didn't have its budget guaranteed, was not likely to find an audience, but I was determined to tell that story. And making that film, I think, revitalized my whole career. I was on the verge of being a Hollywood hack, and there's nothing worse than that. Someone who can turn in those big movies almost like a conveyor belt makes them. And I needed something to stimulate me. You know, the story of Rabbit Proof Fence is the story of 3 young Black Australian girls of mixed race who are taken from their families to be re-educated, and they escape and go on a long journey to find themselves back in their homelands. And I realized reading the script that I needed to get out of Hollywood, go back to Australia, and find out who I was. And I ended up staying there for 10 years. But that was a vital 10 years. I made 3 films, 2 in Australia and 1 in South Africa. And it really was a reawakening for me. At age 50, it was like I was starting again back at age 18.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, you know, you're a world traveler, obviously, but you've had encounters with all these cultures. So you've produced some of, you know, sometimes screen-written, what we call blockbusters movies. You've mentioned some of them. I'll mention them again. Clear and Present Danger, starring Harrison Ford in 1994. The Bone Collector, you've mentioned, and also Salt. How do you attract and get these megastars to play in your movies? And what is it like to work with them? Okay,
so you attract megastars because of your track record. For example, when I came to make The Bone Collector, Denzel Washington was at, well, his height. his height has been reached for about 25 years, but nevertheless, he was at the beginning of his height as one of the great actors, box office attractions. You know, he came to the film based on the previous 4 films that I'd made in Hollywood, all of which had opened well and had done well at the box office. 10 years later, I asked Angelina Jolie to join me in Salt, and 10 years earlier, she remembered being an ingenue, just starting out herself, and enjoyed the experience. So she joined, not based on box office, because in the 10 years in between, I'd made independent films that fared, you know, that had all sorts of outcomes at the box office, but she remembered the experience. So it's based, first of all, on your ability to return money, it's your ability to attract audiences, because actors want to be successful. But it's also based on your bedside manner, just like a good doctor. And that is whether you can instill confidence in the performers. That's how you attract them. What's it like working with them? Well, I'll tell you. You have got to negotiate your relationship at every stage. I remember on Clear and Present Danger, there's a scene near the end where Harrison Ford, playing Jack Ryan, goes in and confronts the American president. And I had photographed the scene with Harrison in profile from the side. And as he does all the time, he came to see the rushes, the previous day's filming, at lunchtime the next day. And after seeing the scene, he stopped beside me in my chair and very quietly whispered into my ear, very quietly, "You know, I've spent years protecting the fact that my nose from the side makes me look like Pinocchio. And the best way of photographing that nose is from the front." So that afternoon, there we were, refilming the scene. And later in the film, we went down to Mexico, and Harrison and I had a disagreement over something. I forget what it was. And the producer, Mace Newfield, rang me up and he said, "Listen, I can finish the film without you, the director. I can't finish it without Harrison, and I'm not going to. So you better make up with him." So, so really, it's not the studios, it's the stars that you've got to negotiate a relationship with. And that involves all sorts of tricks, but most of all, you've got to please them.
Understandable, understandable. So in the audience here, there are people from around the world, America, Europe, Africa, and even Asia. I mean, it's very late in Japan, but there is a fanatical couple of people who are actually listening to every Instagram live that we do. What advice would you give to some of the younger folks that are here? And among them, there are some filmmakers and producers and screenwriters. What advice would you give them? Okay,
today, in 2020, I'd give the same advice as those 3 bearded guys gave me back in September, what was it, 1968? Because they said, don't believe what people say, that it's hard to make a movie, because it's not. And at that time, we had new cameras that were lightweight. We had high-speed film stock that you could film without the addition of expensive lighting and so on. So it was easier at that time. But I tell you what, if it was easy then, it's so easy now, because I'm holding in my hand this iPhone, but any smartphone is the total introduction and end of your career as a filmmaker. And I mean end at the top, successful, because with an iPhone, you can write your script, you can photograph the film, you can edit it, and then through YouTube and other means, you can monetize what you've made. It's a one-stop shop. So the advice I'd give to anyone is, don't believe any of your friends or your mums and dads who say, "Oh, you'll never make it in the movie industry, you'll never even make a film." Anyone can make a film, and it's true now than it's ever been.
Thank you so much.
Just get out there and do it.
Yeah, it's inspiring. People are writing that it's amazing and inspiring. So it really is. Um, Never thought about it this way. So what does innovation represent in the film industry, and how do you continuously learn?
Uh, as I said before, um, innovation, well, learning and innovation, change is certain for all of us. We've changed the way we make films, as I just outlined. We've changed the way that they're distributed. It used to be that we had to physically shift prints, great big heavy crates of film all around the world. Now, and particularly during this pandemic, streaming is the way to reach audiences. But also, you know, in the past, when I started, if you wanted to create an explosion, well, you really had to explode something. It was very dangerous. Nowadays, we make a small spark and the explosion is added through CGI, computer-generated imagery.
Yeah.
So once again, its necessity is the mother of invention. We've got to make films faster nowadays.
Yeah.
We've got to make them cheaper.
Yeah.
And we've got to create environments, worlds for our audience because they demand that based on other successful movies. So you've got to embrace technology, or like a dinosaur, you know, you'll be confined to prehistory.
Yeah, yeah, that's quite clear. So I understand that the crew on a film set that you run, the kind of film that you run, can be up to 250 people. That's, you know, the size of a small company, really. How do you keep them all engaged, motivated, and most importantly, how do you keep them at their peak performance all the time?
There's two ways. The first is trust. Trust is the most important ingredient in any human interaction.
Yeah.
You've got to get your co-workers to trust you. I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Secondly, and this is also important in any industry, but particularly if you're a film director, you have to have a hard back and a soft front. Why do you need a hard back? Because all 250 of those people need to know what your objective is, and they better watch out because you're going to achieve it. Yeah. And they need to know that. But at the same time, as they better get out of the way, they've got to know that if they confront you, they're going to meet a soft front, a heart, a mind that is ready to accept advice from anyone. I'll tell you, the best advice often comes from the most unexpected place. It can be the runner that delivers lunch who makes a comment. Yeah. It can be, you know, the person that is driving that makes a comment. But what's important is that everyone that's working with you knows that if they've got something to say within the limits of your own, you know, availability, you'll listen. Yeah. Because this is how you make a great movie, and it applies to everything great that's done in the world that involves more than one person. If you've got 10 people working together, if they work with trust, and if they work where they know they can rely on each other's acceptance of ideas, then the combined total energy, the combined creativity is not 10 times 1, it's 100 times 1. Because when a group of people work together as one, in a creative endeavor, they greatly multiply the total creativity. Trust is important, and the way I instill trust is I take Harrison forward and I put a blindfold on him. And I lead him around for an hour, along with the rest of the cast and the crew. And I do this on every movie, and it's a great thing for anything you do. And he has to place his trust in me that I will guide him blindfolded and blind on the greatest journey of touch and feel and listen that he or she, in the case of a female actress, has ever gone on. Yeah. And I do that with all of my crew and cast at the beginning of each project. They all have to put on blindfolds and be led around by people they're going to work with, which may be the runner who runs the food, who's relying on the actress who's the leading actress, or vice versa. But that is, in 1 hour, the greatest equalizer and the greatest instiller of trust that you can ever imagine. Amazing. Try it.
I will do that. I will actually, as you know, we run some training, and this is a very good exercise. So just in a nutshell, really showing your hard face and showing your soft face are two critical ingredients.
No, hard back, soft front.
Soft front, okay, got it. Two critical ingredients, and then creating trust around this game of blindfolding the star and really getting them to level up with everyone. That's fantastic, fantastic. In the face of the current, so you are very related to, to the Afro culture in general. You keep a low profile on this, and I'm not going to get into personal things, but in the face of the current discussion around race, diversity, and inclusion, what are some of your insights?
Well, you know what? Hollywood has got the best insights into this, because what we've found in Hollywood is that it's not about doing the right thing. It's not about doing the political thing. Yeah. It's about taking advantage of talent. And I'll explain what I mean.
Yeah.
There has been for many decades a truism in the film industry: women can't direct action. Patty Jenkins came along with Wonder Woman, and she directed action as a woman in a way that no man could ever have done.
Right.
Another truism: white audiences won't watch black stories. Okay, so a group of Africans and African Americans made Black Panther, a black origin story, yeah. With mainly, almost exclusively, black actors and actresses.
Yeah.
And that, like Wonder Woman, became a huge billion-dollar hit.
Yeah.
Now, call it inclusion or call it just smart operating. Being inclusive is smart, because in the film industry, it's all about new vision. That's what we sell.
Yeah.
When I came from Australia, they were saying, wow, gee, these Australians, they look at the world differently. Well, different people look at the world differently. And if you're selling original vision, then be inclusive, because that's the way to succeed.
Yeah.
You'll get a new vision out of it. The way an African-American filmmaker sees life in America is different to the way a white director does. And the way a woman sees the world is different. Take advantage of it to your own advantage.
Yeah, very good points. Thank you for that. There is a question that comes to my mind. The industry, I remember coming to Los Angeles to visit my brother back in 2002 or 2003, I think it was. And at the time, you could feel that there was almost a crisis in the industry. That you felt that things were maybe on the verge of changing. And suddenly, over the last 10 years or so, it seems to me, as a layman, that the industry has reinvented itself around series. And we used to pay £10 or £15 in the UK to go and see a movie. You pay about £10 and you have Netflix, and you have access to so many different films. And where you used to watch one movie for an hour and a half or 2 hours, now you can watch a series that may be 100 hours actually overall. So, what do you think about this thing? Has it given a new lease of life to the film industry, the series and the Netflix of this world, or is it the contrary?
First of all, let me say hello to Sisanda Henna in South Africa, who I see has joined. Hi, Sisanda, how are you? Look, it's the golden age of television again. The first golden age was during the 50s. When so many great directors and writers and actors emerged, particularly in American television. But now streaming has just opened up. Take the example of South Africa. We've seen in the last 6 months 2 worldwide hits on Netflix that were written, produced, directed, and acted by just South African filmmakers. So, and the same thing now, we've seen that Nollywood is coming to people all over the world. The Nigerian film industry, which has been so strong for the last 40 years, now Netflix are commissioning, long-form projects even in Lagos, which is a huge, huge step for African cinema. So not only has this given us greater variety of movies, particularly of programs, particularly in an era where, increasingly it's just these mega budget escapist fare that are being made as movies for real stories and for real diversity, go to streaming services. And I just think it's fantastic, this revolution that we've seen. It's opened up stories that we would never be able to enjoy. I can turn on Netflix right now and go straight to Lagos and watch 25, as I sometimes do, Nollywood movies. I can go straight to South Africa. I can go straight to Ghana. I can go straight to Australia and watch programs that otherwise I would not be able to share.
Yeah, amazing. And I remember meeting you again. Well, the first time was 12 years ago, but again in Lagos in November.
Yeah. As Sisanda points out, Blood and Water and Clean Sono are the two South African series. And of course, there's a young director there, Akin Osimoto. No, how do you pronounce his second name, Sisanda? I'm not sure. You'll probably type it in. Who's now been commissioned to do a Netflix original in Nigeria, his homeland, although he's been working mainly in South Africa. What was the last question that you asked me? Sorry, I got... Omotozo,
Omotozo.
That's right.
No, I was
Omotozo.
I was just referencing that you really have a keen interest yourself. Last time I met you was in November at the film festival there, the African International Film Festival in Lagos, and you were actually teaching people there, some of the arts and crafts of the industry. I have two more questions. What tips about public speaking, the film industry or entrepreneurship would you give to our audience?
Well, Dale Carnegie started it all with his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And even if you're the shyest person, unfortunately, you do need to do that. You've got to step up. It's easier now that we've discovered Zoom and all these other ways of communicating, because we can look right into the eyes of our audience and they can look into our eyes, but you don't have to be there if you get nervous in front of people. You can be at home in your bedroom and talk to 500 or 1,000 people. But you do have to reach out. You do have to instill confidence in small ways or big ways. Get practicing, because it's absolutely essential.
Thank you for that. Practice makes better and perfect. Last question, any final messages you want to give our audience?
Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah, that's right. Read it, but don't take it too seriously, because he was a bit of a manipulator. Sorry. What was your question?
So
eye contact.
Any final messages?
Well, eye contact is important, of course. That's why when I look down here at myself, I don't make as great a connection as when I look up there, ignoring my own countenance, but concentrating on you, the audience. But nevertheless, as a narcissist, I can't help but look down. Sorry.
Philip, thank you.
What was the question? Last question?
The question was really any final messages. Would you like to leave any final messages to people? And do we have a question? We have a question afterwards. Sorry. Before the final messages, just one question. Well, can you say it, please?
Hello, Philip. The question.
Hi.
How many projects have you shot in South Africa, and what keeps you coming back? It's a question from Sisanda.
Okay, I think I've shot 4 projects there. What keeps me coming back is that there's great crews, there's great actors, and also whenever I can come back, I do, because I have 2 half South African Xhosa children, half South African and half Australian. Their grandparents and their cousins are all there. So whenever I get the excuse to move the family back to their homeland so that my kids can spend time with their grandparents, I take it. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is because, you know, there's just such a vibrant film industry there. And also, not only is it vibrant, but also it's cost effective. You can make a film in South Africa that's set anywhere in the world or in outer space so much cheaper than you can in most other places, particularly America or Australia or Great Britain. You know, so the price point is key.
Got it. Got it. Any final messages?
Final message is what those guys told me all those years ago. Anyone can do it. So just get out there and make a movie if that's what you want to do. And technology is your greatest friend. It's not an enemy. It frees us.
Philip, we've learned so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the audience that has followed us, before I give you my final thank yous, I want to let you know, everybody who is attending today, first, thank you again for coming, that we will have another extraordinary, just like today, speaker next week in the person of Mrs. Rokhaya Diallo, who is a journalist, who is also an activist, and really fights the cause of gender, race, and sexism in France, which is a much more difficult thing, in my own opinion, than it is doing the same in the States. So, Philip, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, thank you very much for coming in. And Philip, we'll see you very, very soon. Take good care of yourself.
Speak to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Goodbye, everybody.